to introduce themselves, please.
I am Mike Hogan. I work for Central Liverpool Primary Care Trust. That's part of the National Health Service. I work in a team which commissions social care services for people, predominantly people with learning disabilities, but with other long-term disabling conditions. I have a particular interest in housing.
Hi, my name's Peter Ashcroft. I'm involved with a number of disabled groups, and I like to get my views across, so I hope we have a good discussion today.
Thank you, Peter.
My name's Chris Burkers. I'm a member of my partners in policymaking.
Hi, I'm Devlin. Like Peace, I'm involved in lots of different things, but very concerned about what's going on in the regeneration and the fact that disabled people shouldn't be left out.
Now, to kickstart the discussion, I'm developing a project on Merseyside around the whole housing market renewal initiative, and I got involved with Mike and Peter and Chris and Deborah a few months back now, because you have been meeting to talk about housing. So if I can ask just firstly, what is this Merseyside Partners organisation, and what are they about?
What we done is like they do a number of things, but the thing I was involved in is disabled. It's knowing your rights and giving you self-esteem and knowing what's out there for you. That's what I was. They've helped me with lots of different stuff, so that's what.
And Deborah, do you want to add?
I was just going to add, Merseyside Partners is an organisation that set itself up to support many parents of disabled children and self-advocates, in other words, people with disabilities, in a whole heap of different ways. But it runs many courses, including Partners in Policy Making, which is a leadership course which empowers disabled people and families with someone with a disability to help themselves and help other people as well, and work with the systems and professionals and not work against professionals, to find a way of working together. And that's where I come from.
So picking up from that, it's about the individual as well as about trying to influence policymakers and organisations and stuff like that.
It's just about knowing what's out there for you and giving you the knowledge and know how to go out there and find the people that make decisions, so you can actually know where they're coming from, and then you can say what you think, and then hopefully you come together with a better solution.
Okay. So building on that then, how did the whole issue of housing and your experience of housing, how did you get involved in that whole debate and discussion? Maybe if I start with you, Peter.
Because at the moment I live alone with my mum, but I want to move out on my own. But I know if I get a bungalow, I want it to be accessible. I just want it to be like involved with the community, or not segregated. I want to be part of a community. I don't want to be put with just disabled people. I just want to be part of the community, and it's not just about the bungalow, or wherever you're going to live. It's about getting yourself out there and knowing what you're entitled to, and knowing that you have just what other people have got. It might be a bit harder, but you've got a right to have what you want.
before we go back to follow on each individual case, Chris, do you want to say a few words about housing and your hopes and involved in the issue?
Basically, I'm adult and that's 27 years ago. The first house I moved into was a one-bedroom flat on the back of an old Victorian house. And out my windows, all I could see was brick walls, as if I was putting the back of the house out of the way. And I don't want, I'm trying to make housing so that I'm not put at the back, like using the service quarters entrance, which is what, if you go to hotels, you go into the service corridor because they can't get you in through the front where all normal people, whatever normal is, go into. We're always segregated to around the side or in the back way. So I'm trying to make it so that we're just equal.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. And Deborah, what about yourself? What are the issues for you and how?
Well, I think it would be sensible to start with how I got involved in this project, and Mike invited a selection of people to a first initial meeting because there were concerns about regeneration and that disabled people shouldn't be yet again sidelined as they've been many times in the past on various different issues. So that's where my interest comes from. I live in a complex that's been specifically designed for people with what I suppose you would call special needs. So the majority of my neighbours are disabled in some way or another. I'm greatly concerned that this doesn't continue. There should be avenues now for people to live in the community, in accessible housing, in mainstream streets, small villages, with a lot more choice of where you actually choose. Because one of the other things that people misunderstand is I need an accessible flat, but I also need my neighbours to have accessible flats, because I can't go and have a coffee with a neighbour if she's not got an accessible flat. She could quite possibly come to me, but I can't go to her, and that doesn't build on community. I'm very interested in community, and I think a whole host of issues come from the fact that we haven't got good, strong communities that include everybody in a really inclusive manner.
Okay, thank you for that. Brilliant. Mike, do you want to say something from the PCT side and the whole housing agenda that you've got?
Well, not so much from the PCT side. We're part of a governance. There was a white paper in 2002 around learning disabilities, and one of the headline problems in the white paper was about housing and the poor housing opportunities that people with learning disabilities have. We got involved with self-advocates, with carers, and with other statutory partners. And I was really struck at the very first meeting of the partnership board. We asked self-advocates to say, well, what would you like to get out of this? We're taking your time, we're asking you the questions, what do you think? And one of the first things that was said by this group of people was, there's an awful lot going on in Liverpool at the moment. This is when things were starting to pick up. The city centre was getting dug up and what have you. There's an awful lot going on, an awful lot of building happening, but none of it's for us. And that really struck home. I mean, I think opportunities have got better slowly, and that more people are getting the opportunities to rent accommodation from housing associations and the like. But people felt still that they were at the bottom of the heap. They weren't getting access to the opportunities. So we've been pushing, and we waited a long time, and we were finally received and well received by the Federation of Residents Groups in the Anfield-Breckfield area. They're about to hopefully see and take part in a big regeneration project. And we just wanted to get across to them that message. You know, there are people living in this community not people who will want to parachute in when it all gets done up and rebuilt, but people who actually live here now, and the chances are they're not being heard. The mechanisms are not in place. The people who are spending the money, deciding where money goes, the people who are managing the consultation processes don't know how to get to groups of people who are very, typically marginalised and excluded. So we have a huge interest in redressing that, because unless we get to that, unless we get beyond those obstacles, people with disabilities will always get the kind of trickle-down effect of regeneration rather than be part of the thinking. And they're very much part of those communities, and they demand to be, and you've heard that clearly from Peter and Chris and Deborah. They want to be part of something. In our experience, they add to communities. They're not the problems that people typically can tend to see them as. The people who actually genuinely do add value to ordinary places.
Okay. I mean, for me, what I think's been most exciting about working with this group is that how it isn't anymore a kind of patronising approach to disability, but it's actually you saying, I just want to be part of the process. And I think in looking at it from, looking at housing market renewal, and I know the Tenant Spin project itself has done debates already about the whole housing market renewal process, but a huge amount of neighbourhoods across Merseyside are probably going to face a lot of demolition and re-master planning of those neighbourhoods, with quite a significant amount of money on the table to do that. And I think there is a real opportunity to actually get everybody's needs and wishes on the table so that your needs are met. So just building on kind of what you were saying, I mean, Chris, you're just, Peter, sorry, you're a young lad, you're like any young lad, you want to leave home and your mum probably wants the music a bit louder and quieter and stuff like that. But I mean, what would you hope housing market renewal would do for you, for instance?
Give me a place where I would be set up for be all adapted. I'd be like part of a community. I just feel as though I have my own home. I could do what I want when I want. I can do that anyway, but you'd always want your own place. And I just want to be settled in my own place so I can just enjoy the rest of my life, because when I move somewhere I want to be there for a long time. So it's not like once I'm there I don't want to think to myself, well, this isn't in place. I want everything to be like sorted before I actually make that step, so there'll be no barriers there for me, so I can just have a full life like I do now, but just in my own place.
Okay. And taking on board what we've been saying about the regeneration of the city, do you feel more optimistic? Do you feel positive that that's going to happen and that people are listening to you and that could be an outcome?
I do feel positive, but you need to make people more aware where they're building these properties, because as I've said before in meetings, I might have my name down for a certain area, but that area might not be getting built on, so I could be waiting however long, so there should be a place somewhere where these says, yeah, oh yeah, properties are getting built in this sort of area, would you like to move there?
So in a sense what you're saying is there should be more a clear direction of
there should be more awareness of where properties are getting built, and then people will feel more included and more involved in what's going on, because if you're not aware, you're not powerful, you're just waiting for people to come to you, and that's not a nice thing really. You want to feel included in the choice in where you live, or the city you live in. You just want to feel part of the city.
Yeah. Chris, what about yourself? You're saying you've 27 years been living in your own place. Do you are things more positive now? Do you feel more optimistic that more it's on your housing agenda?
Well, the way I look at it is if they made all properties accessible, I and anyone else can live in an accessible house, but I can't live in an inaccessible house. So that precludes me from moving to certain areas.
So why do you think all houses aren't accessible? What is it? I mean, it's 2006.
Well, they say it's down to cost.
Okay.
That's one of the major.
Okay. We'll come back to the cost issue maybe and have a discussion about that with the audience. So for you, it's always a cost issue, so we've got to make homes...
That's one of the first things that comes out when they say, well, why aren't you building every house accessible?
Okay. Deborah, do you want to say something about how you feel as housing? Is it getting better? Are people listening? The whole city's going to be remodeled, and are you optimistic?
I think I feel now with projects like this that there's more of an opportunity that our voices will be heard and considered. What sticks out to me is I don't want a huger slice of the cake than anybody else. I just want my slice of the cake, and I don't want to be ignored, and I don't want disabled people to be marginalised like they have been for many, many years, as I said before, over lots of different issues. So yeah, I'm quite positive. We've got involved in this. We're being interviewed today. It's going out on the internet. So lots of other people will hear what we've got to say, and hopefully somewhere along the line we will influence people who make the plans and the decision makers and those sorts of things. But when it comes to resources, there's a whole wider issue, I feel, than resources. It's down to people's attitudes, and it's down to people's lack of knowledge and lack of interest. We're the forgotten people often in a lot of these plans and decisions, and hopefully that will change.
And another thing, when you do plans, you should involve people before the plans get even started, and you should involve disabled people, and then the bungalows would be ideal for like everyone, as Chris was saying before. If you just never put a step there to begin with, that wouldn't affect the cost, because that'd be across the board on every house. So that's the main point. If you have a ramp, anyone can get up a ramp, but we can't get upstairs. So that's just common sense. But that little things like that makes the big picture so much easier.
Were you going to say something, Chris? No. Saving it up for later. Okay. I mean, one of the other things I just wanted to talk about was also this whole issue of supported housing, because obviously you're all getting your own. I don't know if people want to talk about your own individual support to maintain your independence, but it's very interesting that in Liverpool gets the second largest national budget for supporting people, for supported housing in this city. Quite extraordinary, really. £43 million are given by the government. That's meant to go into supporting people to maintain their homes. So, the second biggest grant anywhere in the country. So there should, does supporting people help you to
It should be more, you should be more aware of that, because you're not, like, I didn't know that's the second largest. You're not aware of things like this until you come to meetings like we are today. I wouldn't have known that that's one thing that people need to know there's money out there, but would like to know where it's going to.
Okay. I mean, one of the things I wanted to touch on now was a bit, I mean, I want to pick on particularly what Chris was saying, this notion of its cost. I mean, we're living in a city with an excess of housing that, you know, there is, I think, 15,000 empty properties for rent in the city. There's going to be a lot of demolitions and remodelling of all of our neighbourhoods. So, for me, I mean, one of the things, building on also the Liverpool Housing Action Trust stuff, was that actually if you build less houses but much better quality, you can have a much bigger impact on what you're leaving behind, so that, you know, it's not having to be regenerated again and again. I was in Bootle yesterday with another group I'm working with, and there are actually some properties there that are 15 years old that are getting demolished, which was kind of crazy, really. So, I mean, I don't know, were you going to say something about?
Well, yeah, I've been having discussions with people who manage development programs and housing trusts for coming up for 10 years, and I've never yet discovered the difference in the cost of building a 3-bed lifetime home and a 3-bed non-lifetime home. A 2-storey house which is accessible and one which isn't. So I think the cost thing is often used as an excuse. I think a lot of people sort of have this vision instantly. They leap from thinking about housing for people with disabilities to bungalows. Now, bungalows are hugely costly. They take up a lot of land. They cost more to build. And people tell us that, you know, when we're spending housing corporation money now, when we're spending public money on housing, we're competing for it. And if we go for dwellings which take up a lot of floor space and what have you, we just don't get the bid. I think what tends to happen is people are afraid to actually stick out and really think about what's meeting need here. I believe it's much better to spend 100,000 on something than to waste 95,000. And the example you've just given of housing, which was probably built with public money 15 years ago, being demolished, has got to be wasted money. When you're building for 60 years. Sometimes you wonder whether the realisation that you're building for 60 years, the needs of the people that will be coming in 10 and 15 years need to be thought about in doing it. I don't see the evidence of that, which is sad. You know, my understanding of what housing market renewal in Liverpool is going to be about is building a lot more homes for people to buy, probably mainly family housing. And yet if you look at the demographics of Liverpool, the population of single people, beyond young people, the number of people who are single at 45 because their relationship has broken down, a whole host of things don't seem to be figuring in the thinking. And I think the needs of people with disabilities, not just people who need physical accessible dwellings, but the needs of people who have support needs because of other disabilities which are not mobility related, it's just not there. It isn't in the thinking. And that's worrying.
Okay, well, building on this, I don't want to sort of pick out particular people in the audience when I'm going to. Linda and Diane as well, if I can. I mean, your social services staff who obviously went through the Housing Action Trust experience, if you like, and are now mainstreamed into the City Council. I mean, do you think you're able to influence the regeneration programme in the city? And what lessons from the Housing Action Trust programme would you think could be transferred to housing market renewal, if any?
Sorry, one of the things would be to involve. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
No? One of the critical things is to involve people from very early stage, and that includes tenants. I think from Peter and Chris, and we were saying then that they want to be involved in making decisions, so that decisions aren't made for them, then people are told what they're going to live in. I think inclusion is one of the key words I would use. That I know with the HAT, the tenants were involved very early on when all the planning stages, and I don't know with regeneration whether that's, you know, happening as much as we found with the HAT. At the moment, you know, our input is very minimal, so I don't know what changes we could make at the moment. Do you agree with that? I think,
Yeah,
you know.
and also we had an OT. In our team was a multidisciplinary team of social workers, OTs, mental health workers. So the OTs are able to input very much into the new build and the refurbished accommodation, and we don't know whether that's happening or not really, but that's certainly quite important that occupational therapists are involved at a very early stage in the whatever's being built, whatever's being planned.
But you don't feel that that's happening at the
We
moment
don't
in
know. We
Liverpool?
don't know enough about
I
it
think,
really.
as I say, our inclusion has been very minimal at this point in time, which maybe is concerning. That we don't know that. I don't know. It's as Diana said, one of those things that made the hat work was that tenants were involved and a whole host of multidisciplinary people were involved to make sure we got it right first time. Really.
I mean, if I just build on that a little bit with some of the initial findings that we're finding, for instance, and the area will remain nameless, but there's one first phase of a housing market renewal where they're actually building the first phase will involve 300 new social housing units, housing for rent, alongside quite a lot of housing for sale. But of those 300 units, they're all general needs housing. Very sophisticated. This is really sophisticated stuff here. This is top drawer stuff. All general needs housing, and the housing staff have already told me off the record that 50% of the tenants who have been allocated those properties will not be able to maintain their tenancies. So they've already allocated people that have been moved away from a clearance area to come back to have their dream house built in their dream community, their remodeled community, and 50% of them won't be able to, for whatever support reason, not just about physical access, but I think there are a lot of older people, for instance, in blocks of flats with no lift, so somebody's on the third floor, so so why do we think these things still happen? This is 2006. We're all brainy, inclusive people.
You don't think common sense. That's all you need, a bit of common sense, and then that's from personal experience. You don't put someone on the third floor if they can't get out, and if they're in a wheelchair and there's no lift, you don't put people on the third floor, and we know people like that they've been put on the third floor and then they're stuck in the room waiting for people to come, and they can't get out to do anything they want to do. So that's what I said before. It's not just about the bungalow, it's about the bigger picture. You want, before you move in somewhere, you've got to make sure you can use the kitchen, you can use the bathroom, you can use everything you need in your home is accessible for you to use, because it's alright having a bungalow, but if you can't reach the taps or if you can't reach the wake services, what good's that?
Yeah.
So it's just having the people there like us to say, oh yeah, we'll help you, because that's what we're here for. If we work together, then it'll be a better thing to do.
Okay. Did you want to come in on that, Deb?
Yeah, I was just thinking that I think largely the problem seems to be, to me, there's a lack of understanding that people with disabilities have just got as many aspirations as their peers, and that's quite right. But society and the builders and all the other people that have the ability to make the decisions about our lives, they're not able to understand this concept just yet. And one of the things that, sorry, I'm waffling slightly. One of the things that dawned on me was my sisters, who are kind of like my peers, had moved several times. I've moved once in my life, and I daren't move again because I may not get what I've got now. There's this idea that once you're housed as a disabled person with all the things that you might need that are being paid by social services or whoever's paid for the renovations and adaptations and all those sorts of things, you're going to stay there for the rest of your life. Your needs are not going to change, your circumstances are not going to change, and you'll stay there. When everybody else moves all around the country, has a much more larger opportunity to pick where and how they live and what sort of housing they live in, we get maybe one choice, and that's not a choice in my opinion.
Right, okay. I mean, the other issue as well that we were talking about before was this whole, I mean, one of the big drivers of housing market renewal is to diversify tenure, is the sort of grown-up speak to make sure that people are either owning their properties or sharing ownership of them or whatever. I mean, how does that whole property ownership issue affect disabled people? What's, you know, we were talking before, what's the issue there?
The issue there, in this country, I think if you went into a building society as a non-wage earner, don't mind a person with a disability who might have a need for a particular kind of dwelling, if you went in as a non-wage earner and asked for a mortgage, you'd probably see a few jaws dropping. The general kind of the general perception is that if you are a person on benefits, you don't buy. If you're a person with a disability, you will tend to be. You're more likely, shame to say it, you're more likely to be on benefits. So there's a huge challenge there. I think if you look at the whole kind of housing planning for older people, there's a recognition that 20 years ago building housing for older people to rent was a solution. Now, I guess by 2010, 50% plus of older people will hit retirement age as homeowners, and they're not going to want to rent. I think the challenge for us is to say, if we are treating people as citizens and we're trying to redress a balance or an imbalance, that we actually start to think about how we give people who have disabilities routes into home ownership. I'm proud to say that we're actually looking at it here. We just got some funding to set up a kind of a learning group, a learning set with housing advisors, housing staff, care managers in Liverpool to develop local knowledge about how you actually support people to buy or to get into shared ownership arrangements, because it's something which is clearly not there at the minute. And it's important for two reasons. I think it's important because it gives equality, it gives people a very important message. You have the right to the same as other people, but it's also clear that if you look at the social rented stock in this city and anywhere, that it isn't going to be able to meet the needs of a lot of people. So they need other options to pursue if they can't get what they need or want following a rented route. If people aren't building accessible dwellings, we should be making sure that routes into those in other ways are opened up. It's a big challenge at the moment. It's quite exciting, but it's clear we're not going to sort of change the world in a week. But it needs looking at.
It's about having the choice as well. You might not want to buy, but you might want to buy. But it's about having the choice. At least if you've got a choice, you're not like told, oh yeah, you just live here, or you'll have to rent, or it's about having the choice, and then having the choice makes you feel more like in control, more about you, it's not about, oh yeah, I've got to live here, but once you own it, that's yours, then do you know what I mean? That's part, you feel like that, I should imagine anyway, you feel very like, this is mine, you feel very proud to say, I own this.
Okay. Can I just, again, not to pick on people in the audience, but I know we've got a representative from Liverpool Access here, Alex Watson. And Liverpool's quite unique, I think, in that it has some sort of sense of coordination of all its specialist type of housing that exists in the country. I mean, Alex, could you say a little bit about what Liverpool Access does for a start, so that we can all get that information?
Okay, we're part of the City Council, but we also work with 24 housing associations, and we work in partnership with those organisations to try and get a feel for the kind of accommodation that people want in the city who can't live in your general two-up, two-down or a house. And we work with people who need accommodation that is accessible. We also work with older people who are looking to live in a supported environment, so sheltered housing or housing with additional support on site. We're also working with a service that's trying to establish routes into general needs accommodation for people with learning disability. And I'm involved as part of that with the city at looking at the wider picture, so some of those issues that we've talked about already. At the moment, I'm doing a big programme at trying to map which property in the city owned by social landlords has already had some investment in it in terms of putting in adaptations and kind of how big that property is, what was done to it, whether it's still there, and trying to build that into a 3D model that we can overlay with the city, looking at issues around HMRI, looking at some of the demand issues that we have from disabled people who are waiting to be rehoused, so that we can look at kind of what the supply is and how we're going to meet that supply in the long term, looking at where the gaps are from what people are actually asking us at Access Liverpool to provide for them. We're also working with the city in, I know they're about to commission a survey on the needs of people across the city, looking at some of those issues that we've talked about. I've been part of some of the consultation that's gone on in the initial stages to make sure that they're addressing some of the issues around disability, some of the issues around ethnicity, some of the difficulties we have trying to find adapted property for very large families, for example. So to make sure that they're addressing some of that work when they're doing this consultation, really, and bringing that through to a group of City Council strategic planners to look long term about, how can we make sure that what we provide in the future is actually going to meet the needs today, and also what we think might be the needs in 10 and 15 years' time.
You could make people aware of what we're about your building properties. That's one thing. I'm on Access, but as I've said, it's about where I put down to live. There might not be things getting built there, so I could be on your list for years, but it's about making people aware about these bungalows or houses or flats are getting built, so people are aware, and it's about making sure that people are in their meetings where things are getting spoken about.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and one of the things we've always struggled with at Access is not really having a clear picture of what existed across the city, to say to people who are applying to us, what you're asking for exists, first of all, which is why we started this mapping exercise initially, and that's been a long programme because providers maybe over a number of years have put in adaptations around a tenant who they had, and it may have been 10, 15, 20 years ago that stuff was done to a property, and trying to get that data from providers in a way that was useful and that we could look at and use to kind of inform what we're doing has been a long programme, but we're hoping to have that finished within the next couple of months and go on to the next stage of that, which is overlaying what exists against what people are actually asking for and seeing where those gaps are. And I think you're right. I mean, I'm not involved in kind of some of the HMRI stuff that you're talking about, which is about planning for new developments, but some of this work that we're doing now will feed into that, certainly through the strategic partnership of the City Council, and I think that's the first part of work that we need to do.
So would you make people aware of where the buildings are getting built from now on, or?
Well, when we know about it, yes, we'll certainly share that information. What we would like to do is to kind of develop a directory of accessible accommodation in the city that we can then share with people who are, to enable them to make informed choices about where they want to live.
So in a sense as well, what you're saying is that I heard about this housing survey that was going on in terms of people's needs, and I was quite shocked that it took so long. You know, if you go around parts of Liverpool now with boarded up houses, and you know, there's been a lot of master planning going on in some of these neighbourhoods, and there hasn't even been a housing mix come up with, or a needs analysis of what people need. It's kind of quite shocking, really. I think we have to be really quite frank and say it's, you know, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to change a neighbourhood, and you're not quite sure who your neighbourhood is. You're kind of not going to get it right, are you? But it's good that it's happening. I think it's good that now there's kind of, for the next phase, and housing market renewal is a kind of 20-year programme, probably 15-year. You know, the next phase of stuff will hopefully get more sophisticated.
Especially now it's capital culture, you've got to like strike while the iron's not really everything while money's there, you know what I mean? Because it might not be there afterwards.
Yeah. Did you want to come in, Deborah?
I just wanted to comment about the thought of consultation. I know through many things that I've been involved in over the years that there's been lots of consultation about lots of things in this city with people with disabilities, but what we never ever get is the action after the consultation. The findings of the consultation are great, and there's this kind of idea that you consult with people and then that's it. Well, consultation should be the start of a story. It should be for a purpose to make things better, and if it never ever makes anything better, then that's a huge waste of money, time and time and time again. So I'd be really keen to see that this consultation actually goes somewhere.
Okay. Audience, anyone want to say, Dolly, give us a song. Anyone want to say anything? Contribute to the debate, take us down an avenue.
This brings back a lot of memories of the 60s, and the whole of Scotland Road, the Vauxhall, was all emptied out. Naturally, after the war, some houses needed knocking down. But we had no choice. There was no organisations to help you in any way. You were sent where they said you had to go. And with them saying there wasn't enough land, they had to build blocks. But there was a lot of criticism, and that's in the Wilson area, because of the blocks being built and people living in blocks. But they had no choice. Land wasn't around to build houses, masonettes or whatever, so they had to build blocks. Then what happens in 1993? The Housing Action Trust comes along because the City Council ran out of money and they could not keep up with the repairs for them blocks. And they did go through a lot, the Housing Action Trust. Even though they were the government team, they went through hell. From residents where you lived in the community didn't want them. They wanted to stay with the council. So you get a letter from the council saying, well, we've got no money, and you've got leaks here, leaks there, and leaks everywhere. These have got money. So that's the best thing to do is put it through a vote. And that's how we voted the hat in to do our blocks. Unfortunately, some people were happy. 67 blocks across the city is very unique. And you're talking about 5,000 people being uprooted out of their homes. But some, up to now, were very happy and glad of the hat, because pulled down the blocks which was drug related, and people were going through a lot in the communities. They knocked them down. And what annoys me now is this housing crisis. Half of our people moved out the communities, and like everyone else, they want to come back in the city through transport and all that. But they're not allowed. Our local communities haven't got the money to pay the prices they're asking. It's all for sale, buying the homes. We know everyone would love to have their own home, but think, we are the first generation to live as long as we are. Because in the past, our poor mothers and grandmothers, they died in the 60s and the 70s. We're living longer, and we're having a say. But no one wants to listen. We've been to the town hall, I'm made up that you are here today. I really am glad. I have joined a forum over the help in the Vauxhall area with Tony Hunt, Central PP Trust, and Atlantic Partnership to make sure that the help comes first in all people, not just elderly, in all our people, the young as well. And I feel that we should show more power we're sitting down too much. You go to town hall and you look around and you've got about 2 or 3 people. You need, they call it great power in America. I don't know, we go to Blackpool every year. I'm on the Age Concerned Senior Citizens Forum. I'm involved in any committee that's for my community, as long as I can do good. I'm disabled, you know, but I'm not on a wheelchair, but I am. I'm disabled. But I just don't let it get me. I'm proud of you. Keep going, day after day.
Dolly, can we just say, I mean, one of the reasons why the Hat said it demolished lots of tower blocks was because the housing wasn't suitable for an ageing population. So the properties that they put back, from what you've seen, I mean, are they more accessible? Are they a higher quality?
Yes.
Are they, you know, would they be suitable? Would Chris
Yes.
be able to come into your bungalow and have a cup of tea with
Chris,
you? And, do
if
know
you
what I
come
mean?
into my bungalow, it's a long life home. It's a long life, what the Hat created. I've got to be honest. The council had built bungalows in the past, but not compared to what they had done. Of course, it was McLean's, the developers, but they made a real good job. Wide for your wheelchair to go in and out the kitchen, the lights on low where you can reach out, a walk-in shower where you can sit down, everything. And that, you know, to me, I'm in one now. I didn't want it. I was 38 years living in the block of flats, which I loved, because we were a community and we all helped one another. But that, they didn't have the money to do the two. But what annoys me is, it's being sold for apartments. And I have a list of people, because the housing associations has pooled with the council, as you all know, on the bid for accommodation. And our own local people don't stand a chance. I've got people ringing me up, I've been after such a thing. I was born there, I want to be near my grandmother, I want this. No chance.
Well, there's another issue that Dolly's saying, picking up on that. Are the housing associations in Liverpool too powerful? Are they controlling everything? Are they looking after... I mean, one of the things I've been interested in looking at the history of Shelter is, Shelter were very involved in the 60s when it first set up in Granby Toxteth and helped establish LHT, and were at that time seen as, you know, neighbourhood action project that Shelter set up was seen as saving that community. There's a lot of calls now for LHT to get out of Toxteth, Granby. 40 years later, so
Because them days
do
you
we
only
need
had
new
landlords.
housing providers.
You had landlords in the 60s. The Welsh Street was the landlord, you know, most properties down End, all on the Dockland. I come from the Welsh Street. It was all landlords.
It's about they might now think it's about letting people into what they know, so it makes things better for everyone, because they might have the power, but if they don't share the information, that doesn't move anything forward. So if you share the information, you get better communities, you get better everything, because it's about working together as a community, or rather it's about sharing what you know, and knowledge is power.
But picking up on what you're saying, if there's not been a housing mix done of what the needs are in a community, somebody somewhere is deciding we'll build 300 general needs flats. So is that just been run by business? Is it just business dictating that? The housing association say, well, we'll get all our income from this, so we'll fill in with somebody. And
They're just doing them, not knowing who they're doing them for.
I think the
But Paul, it's
Whether
not
Don
only that.
experience-
Sorry.
I think the experience you've just described is interesting, because you said to begin with you lived in a block, you were happy there, you didn't want it to come down.
It's on the 10th floor.
Yeah. But what you've ended up in is something which works for you, and it sounds like it works for you because you're actually listened to in the whole process of redevelopment.
I'm a campaigner, you say, and
Yeah.
I've been for 30 years, and I
Yeah.
won't give up now.
No.
Even though I'm ill and
Yeah.
health,
Yeah.
I just won't give up.
Yeah, but I guess
I'm like these here.
yeah, but I guess
Good
the
on
people
you.
that live near you, your neighbours, had a say in what they were moving
That's
into.
right, we did.
And that's a big
We had
difference
a say in
between
design, but only through the heart.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's a good
Housing Action Trust.
so we have a good example of local
and
locally.
your landlord, your registered landlord.
Yeah.
You know, who taken on. There was 12 registered with the corporation, at least 12, 10 to 12 for the hat, to help them for the new build all around. It which is a very difficult job when you come to weigh it up.
Sure.
5,000 people.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a
There
big
was a
job.
lot of people to be
Yeah.
rehoused, and some of them blocks where the structure had gone,
Yeah.
and we told us straight they'll have to come down.
Yeah.
We agreed. But there is some that will be kept up and refurbished.
Are there any other, just want to bring in any other audience members, if anyone's got any views on the whole regeneration process going on in Liverpool and whether everyone's views are being taken into account? Or should we all just roll over and let them get on with it? No?
Well, I'm only a member of the general public, mate. I can't say I'm an expert on this issue, you know, so I'll just generalise. And one of the things I'd like to, apart from the building side there, Paul, was the statements that our friends have made here. Going through life, I've watched the disabled society coming on, you know, and at one time in the Dark Ages, it was assumed ignorantly that people disabled in the body were also disabled in the mind. And that was an assumption that if somebody had a disabled person in the family, what can you do? That's it, you know, so not me. Until somebody, some group of people somewhere points at this fact out, these people are not disabled in the mind. They have a lot to give to society if they're given the chance. And I remember, I can't put my finger on dates, times, years, what government was in power at the time, but somebody said, let's introduce some of these people to a factory where somebody's disabled in one part of the body can use their hands and what's this. And to me, I saw it on the television, and it seems to look like as if people had just opened a door to a new life sort of thing. And I interviewed them, they were happy, they were getting along with the grace. The other issues is, as our friend just mentioned, cost should not come into it. Cost shouldn't be a thought on it. And it'd be interesting to see right now what's being integrated into the Paradise Street project as regards accessibility. Now there's a big massive project, and when in my mind I see a possible situation where a council should, when a development is about to take place, everything connected with that development as regards note papers should have a heading: access, disability. Just keep that in their minds, because I think the first thing they start to do is plan the garden layouts, plan the kitchen layouts, plan the what's. I think disability gets kicked into touch. And also, these people need backing from able-bodied people. I think they would be listened to more, because I think, as you just said, people will sit down and consult with them. Once the consultation's finished, the door's closed there, that's it, you know, and I'll be just going about their business. Want people stand up and keep it in their minds all the time. It should be a government policy, should be harped on, but able-bodied people should stand up and force and say, these people need seeing to. Cost should not be involved at all. It should be prioritised, and disability access to every form of accommodation, buildings, shopping precincts, everything, entertainment centre, it should all be taken into view. And I've watched it over 70 years, and I've seen, I know from the dark days, the attitude. It has moved on, it has come on. Whether it's moving fast enough, whether it's moving far enough is another issue I couldn't say. But it does want keeping in the forefront, it wants keeping in front of people's eyes, it wants publicising until it's put right. Until we don't need to have a meeting like this where these people can say, this isn't right, I can't do this and go there, but I can't do that. They should be able to have access to every single thing that we can have access to. That's all I say.
Thank you, John. I mean, one of the things we're going to be doing next is actually looking at some of the developments as a group in Liverpool, and we're going to focus on Anfield and look at the regeneration plans in Anfield. But also, I think it might be good to look at the Grosvenor development in town as well, look at the plans and talk to the architects, and just see, you know, almost do an audit of just how accessible it would be for I think there was always a statistic that 30% of the building, the Grosvenor on Gervais Park, isn't accessible. I think I've heard that in the press, that however it's designed, it's you know, you'll be excluded from it. So how do you feel about that?
In this day and age, that should not be a factor. As the man just said then, that's going back years ago when people were in homes, not be locked away. That shouldn't be the case anymore. People should be able to live how they want to live, no matter what the circumstances should be allowed to live a life where you're happy, content, but people are like telling people that access is still an issue when it shouldn't be an issue. There's white papers now and laws, and you still get people not going with the laws. You still find problems when it's meant to be all accessible now, but we're still fighting. But they companies or whoever should be getting sued, but you don't know where to go, who to turn to next. Otherwise I'd be suing everyone all the time.
I mean, one of the things maybe we could do is talk to planning committees, because they obviously have quite a lot of power and are approving housing schemes across the city. Maybe we could do that. Deborah, you were going to...
I was just going to add something on the back of what Pete's just said and what Paul's just said. I'm quite shocked to hear that they would deem it even acceptable to build a building with parts that people with disabilities, wheelchair users or people who have difficulty walking couldn't go. To me, that's totally unacceptable. I can cope with an idea of a building that was built 50 years ago, 60 years ago or longer, not having good access. I think it's completely unacceptable for them to even think that they could get away with it now.
I think that's something we should explore. I'm sure there was something, an article in the Echo about it. I think we'll go and explore that one. Chris?
The problem is the architects need disability awareness training.
So maybe we should go and talk to the architects as well, and I think we've already got plans to talk to the architects that are involved in some of the new build housing regeneration things, so I think we need to go and see, and I think there should be design guidance that says this is a minimum standard you should have, and I'm really naive, aren't I? I think, sorry, you're chuckling away there. I kind of think, the hat simply had design guidance for all our properties. Well, why don't they just take that and make sure that that's implemented?
If it worked for the hat,
well,
why can't it work for everyone?
Because people like reinventing the wheel, I think, where rather than take it, there were lots of things we got wrong. I think I'm not going to say we got everything right at all, but I don't know. Has anyone else got any points they're burning to make? And Nikki.
Hi, I'm a youth worker. I suppose the point I wanted to make is people talk about cost being an issue, and as a youth and community worker, particularly working with young people, I think the long-term costs, get it right at the beginning, and the long-term costs would be a lot less. Examples I would give, I lived in a scheme when I was 18, and the community was designed by somebody who hadn't asked anybody, and they stuck 50 under 20-year-olds in the same street. Now, we had a great time as teenagers, but within 2 years, every single property was void. And I think you'd have asked anybody, that's not a way to create a community. And then they consulted the community, and then it was replaced with a mixture of everybody, and it worked. And I think one of the other things that I think that we've forgotten is, for years there have been people with disabilities, for years there have been people who have been excluded, but they've been supported by their neighbours, their family, their friends. And that is the way that the communities do exist. And I think if you allow communities to be created where there is a mixture of people who will support the neighbour. There's a guy in my street who's got mental health problems. He doesn't get the support for whatever reason he's supposed to get, but we look after him when he does one. We look after him and we sort him out, and that's what all communities normally do. But because we're allowed to do that, and I think if we think long term, if we think of the way normal we all want to live, we all want to live with a mixture of ages, sizes, shapes, whatever. That's the way it is. We will look after our neighbours. It'll cost a lot less money in social services, in mental health things, in police. And so if its cost is an issue, I think it'll cost less if we actually sort the communities out right in the first place.
Okay. Any other points before we wrap up this show?
And I had a call from a friend of mine, exactly, and he's lost his 2 legs, whatever illness it was, and they've waited for a chairlift quite some time, and they had to bring the bed down into the living room or yeah, it was a one leg and you could manage up the stairs there, but since the two legs, you can't. And I've learned since with running around that you can make an appointment in Kempson Street where all the equipment is, or on the care line, and make an appointment for whatever equipment, and I believe they quicken it up a bit. I don't know. This is what I got on
The
the phone.
adaptation. I mean, I think adaptations again is another whole show, because I know the HAT experience, we knew a lot of our residents wouldn't get through the HAT program, so we did put a lot of money aside to make people's lives in the short term. You know, a simple adaptation can have such an impact on somebody's home life, and you know, and I think that's another show. But Deb, do you want to say something?
It just come to me as we was talking there, that if you get things right in the first place, surely that would save a huge amount of money. When you get things wrong and they have to be redone, that costs a lot of money, so why not get it right in the first place? There's a lot of people like myself and Chris and Peter who are more than willing to get involved and talk to people, but finding the right people to talk to has been a huge problem for us for a long, long time.
Okay. Right, I'd like to wrap it up there. I'd like to thank my esteemed panel today very much. It was very enjoyable, and it's a pleasure working with you, as you know, and we have a laugh. Shelter will be back. We are 40 this year, and although the housing problems that Liverpool faced 40 years ago are a lot different, I think they're much more sophisticated, the housing problems that the city faces now. And it'd be nice one day if we were redundant, but we're not. So we will still be plugging away, and we will be back here in a couple of months with a video. I think we're going to do a video on this issue and bring it back and have another broadcast and start rattling a few cages, I think. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for coming, and see you soon.